The Pomeranian, that 5-pound ball of fur riding around in a designer handbag, is actually a shrunken Arctic sled dog, and DNA just proved it. A wolf-adjacent working animal that once hauled loads across frozen tundra and drove livestock through killing cold, quietly compressed into a toy by a little over a century of human vanity. For decades, almost everything the public believed about the Pomeranian was wrong. Most people assume it has always been small, a delicate ornament bred for laps and nothing else. Some imagine it as an ancient aristocratic novelty. Others figure that with a name like Pomeranian, it must come from some cozy corner of Europe where tiny dogs were always the whole point. Every one of those assumptions falls apart under the genetics. So let's be clear about one thing right now. The Pomeranian is not a fragile decoration that happens to look like a fox. It's a Spitz, a member of the oldest, hardest-working family of dogs on the planet. The same family as the Siberian Husky, the Samoyed, the Alaskan Malamute, and the Keeshond. And buried in the science is a contradiction that took researchers years to untangle. Here's the setup. The gene that makes your Pomeranian tiny is more than 10,000 years old. But the tiny Pomeranian itself is younger than the light bulb. Both of those statements are true, and holding on to that contradiction is the whole point, because resolving it is the entire story. So where did this dog actually come from? The answer begins in the far north, in Iceland, in Lapland, on the frozen edges of Scandinavia, thousands of years ago. The ancestors of the Pomeranian were not small, and they were not decorative. They were powerful northern Spitz dogs, and historical accounts put them somewhere between 30 and 50 pounds. That's roughly 10 times the size of the dog sitting in your lap. They pulled sleds across snow and ice. They herded reindeer and sheep across brutal terrain. They guarded homes and camps in the kind of cold that kills. Every one of them was wrapped in a thick double coat, the exact same coat the modern Pomeranian still wears today on a heated couch, in an apartment, in a climate it will never need protection from. That coat is survival gear the breed never gave back. Your Pom is walking around in a parka built for the Arctic. And these dogs weren't just tough, they were wolf-adjacent, and that isn't poetry. When geneticists studied the northern Spitz breeds of Scandinavia, they found a specific maternal lineage in the mitochondrial DNA that traces back to crossbreeding with wolves in the region. That genetic signature clusters in exactly the reindeer herding and hunting Spitz dogs the Pomeranian descends from. That fearless, oversized attitude your 5-pound dog aims at animals 10 times its size. That has a bloodline. Now, the name. This is where the first myth dies. Pomerania was a region on the Baltic coast in what's now northern Poland and eastern Germany. The name comes from a Slavic phrase meaning land by the sea. And here's the twist most owners never learn. The breed did not originate there. Pomerania is not its birthplace. Pomerania is where it was shrunk. The Germans call it the Zwergspitz, the dwarf Spitz, and that name tells you exactly what Pomerania contributed to the story. As those large Arctic dogs migrated south into European life, breeders in that region began selecting for smaller and smaller animals. The dog was named after the place it got downsized, not the place it came from. It's like naming a person after the gym where they lost the weight. For a long time, that was as far as anyone could take the story. Breeders had theories. Historians had old paintings, including 18th century portraits showing Pomeranians with the familiar coat and curled tail. Except these dogs were big, some of them the size of a small sled dog. But nobody could actually read the animal's ancestry. Then DNA changed everything, and it did it in 2 directions at once. First, the size. In 2007, a team led by Nathan Sutter and Elaine Ostrander at the National Human Genome Research Institute published a landmark study in the journal Science. They were hunting for what controls body size in dogs, and they found it: a single stretch of the genome around a gene called IGF1 that acts almost like a master dial. One version pushes a dog toward large, another pushes it toward small. And here's the part that resolves our contradiction. The small size version is ancient. It shows up across nearly every tiny breed on Earth, and it carries the fingerprints of a genetic event that happened thousands of years ago, long before Pomeranians, long before kennel clubs, long before anyone was breeding for cute. The switch was already sitting in the dog genome, dormant, waiting. So the Victorians didn't invent a new animal. They found the smallest carriers of an ancient gene and cranked the dial as hard as it would go. That's how you shrink a sled dog by 80% in just a few generations. The raw genetic material was already there. That's the 10,000-year-old gene inside a 100-year-old dog. Second, the family tree. When researchers mapped the relationships between dog breeds using their full genomes, the Pomeranian landed exactly where the sled dog story predicted, deep inside the Nordic, or Spitz, branch. A genetic lineage that traces straight back to ancient Arctic dogs and sits apart from the toy breeds of Asia and the hounds of Europe. On the level of DNA, the Pomeranian's closest relatives are not the Chihuahua or the Yorkie it shares a shelf with at the pet store. Its closest relatives are working sled dogs and reindeer herders. The Samoyed, that big, smiling 70-pound snow dog, is essentially your Pomeranian's much larger sibling. Same family, same ancient roots, wildly different size. The AKC classifies the Pomeranian in the toy group, though the FCI, the Fédération Cynologique Internationale, recognizes it as the smallest variety of German Spitz, placing it squarely where the genetics say it belongs. So who actually turned the dial? That story runs through one of the most influential dog owners in history. Her grandmother started it. Queen Charlotte brought Pomeranian-type dogs to England back in 1767, but those were still the large, older type, dogs that could top 20 pounds. It was her granddaughter, Queen Victoria, who transformed the breed forever. On a trip to Florence in 1888, Victoria fell for a comparatively small red sable Pomeranian and brought him home. His name was Marco, and he weighed about 12 pounds. Small for the time. And Victoria was not a casual owner. She was the most famous woman in the world, with a royal kennel and a nation watching her every move. She built a serious breeding program, deliberately importing small Pomeranians in different colors from across Europe. When she exhibited Marco at the Crufts Show in 1891, the effect was instant. Overnight, the fashionable Pomeranian became the smallest possible Pomeranian, and breeders everywhere started chasing Tiny. The numbers tell you how fast it happened. During Queen Victoria's lifetime alone, records show the average size of the breed dropped by half. Breed clubs rewrote their standards, pushing the weight limit down and down toward the 3 to 7 pound toy we know now. By 1912, the Pomeranian was such a pampered darling of the wealthy that when the Titanic went down, 2 of the only 3 dogs to survive the disaster were Pomeranians, carried into the lifeboats by their owners. In a single human lifetime, an Arctic sled hauler had become a first-class passenger. But that transformation came with a bill, and it was written directly into the dog's body. This is the part the fluffy pictures never show you. When you shrink an animal that far, that fast, the machinery starts to fail. Pomeranians are plagued by collapsing tracheas, a windpipe grown too weak to stay open, producing that unmistakable honking cough. Their kneecaps slip out of place, and luxating patellas are the single most common orthopedic problem in the breed. Their teeth are crowded into jaws too small to hold them, which drives early dental disease. Some are born with skulls that never fully close. Puppies can crash into hypoglycemia, dangerous low blood sugar that can turn fatal fast. And then there's alopecia X, black skin disease, where the very coat that made the breed famous thins, falls out, and leaves the skin darkened and bare. We selected for a silhouette, and we inherited a medical file. The sled dog's body was engineered for endurance in the harshest places on Earth, and we kept shrinking the container until the engineering couldn't hold. Scientists call this process neoteny, the selective retention of juvenile features, and in the Pomeranian's case, we ran it further than almost any other breed on Earth. That's the resolution to the contradiction we started with. The tiny Pomeranian is barely a century old. The gene that made it possible is older than agriculture. And the animal underneath the fashion, under the show coat and the handbag and the Instagram filter, is thousands of years old, and it was never delicate. The Pomeranian was never what we thought. It was never a fragile little ornament, never a toy built for laps, never just a fluffy accessory riding in a purse. It's an Arctic sled dog wearing the last of its parka, carrying a 10,000-year-old gene and a whisper of wolf, bred down for fashion until it forgot it was ever a giant. DNA didn't just rewrite where the Pomeranian came from. It revealed that the smallest, softest dog on the couch is the ghost of one of the toughest dogs that ever lived.